All right. What's up, everybody? Good night, or good evening, late evening, however you see it. Let Tom know I'm on now. Watching the Astros game. Go Stros. I grew up watching the Astros. Them and the Chicago Cubs, they were the two teams we got on TV when I was growing up in New Orleans. Right, so I kind of grew up watching the Astros, being in Houston for, 4 years, 5 years, however long I was there doing my PhD, starting my PhD. Haha. Got to know the Stros pretty well. I actually got to go to one of the World Series games when they were playing the Nationals. Was that 20? It was 2019, right? So it was the home game. So I was there, Minute Maid Park. I remember even I was adjuncting. I was a professor. I even canceled my office hours that afternoon. I told all my students, "Sorry, I'm headed over to the World Series game. I got tickets." So, but that was fun. Anyway, I don't know what's going on tonight. Tom will be here just shortly. I don't know if anybody else is stopping in, so I thought, I could hang out with y'all a little bit tonight. After all, it's Friday. I have nothing else to do. I had a couple things I'd wanted to talk about. It would have been a lot more fun to talk about it if, other people were here. But, I can maybe mention a few things. So one, last week, Joe and I were kind of, yelling at each other about The Void. That was a lot of fun. I went back to, so this is Glenn Coughlin's translation. And his translation is Introduction of Aristotle's Physics. This book is worth having just for the appendices alone. The translation's very good. It's very readable. It's very accessible. But you can sort of see there, right? All the appendices on the different parts of the physics. He does a great job of explaining this. It's fantastic. But so he actually has one of the appendices is on the void that I went back and read. Good. I've already forgotten what page. There we go. That I went back and read somewhere between this last week, this week, whatever. And he had a couple of interesting things to say that I would just point out. And then I also picked up, it's been almost 2 weeks now. I need to finish this book. So Sam Gregg, formerly, but at least what I knew him was the director of research at the Acton Institute. He has since left that position. He's moving up in the world. I honestly couldn't tell you what he does now. I forget. I know I don't think it's the American Enterprise Institute, but I could be wrong. But anyway, he published this book. It was published Tuesday, October 18th. Right, so we're coming up on 2 weeks. You can see, right, with there I am. I've, between class prep, dissertation work, I don't know, the administrative, running a college, that I haven't had nearly the opportunity to read this as much as I want. But there's Tom. What's up, Tom?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. I can hear you.
How you doing?
Good.
It's going all right, man. It's been busy, but what you been up to?
I'm living the dream, man.
What's it like being retired?
No, I am. I mean, all I got on my calendar is tennis, golf. Going out to eat.
Oh goodness, it must be difficult.
I mean, I never figured it would work out like this for me, but hey.
That's right, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine what it must be like to only need to do the things that you want to do every day.
That's right. I mean, really. If I have to. I just, kings of old didn't live like me. And the only, there's a website called Uncommon Descent, which is a intelligent design website. Which is, we were going to talk about that too, weren't we?
A little bit, yeah.
We were talking about that, the Days of the Earth stuff?
I think we did. It was a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, okay. Anyway, oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, because you told me about what was the guy's name? Hugh Ross.
Hugh Ross.
Yeah. I went and looked up some of his stuff.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I watched that debate he had with Ken Ham and all that. Yeah.
Ken Ham is such a hate to speak ill of a fellow brother in Christ, right? But,
I don't know. I don't have any qualms about talking about James Martin, but I guess I should.
About who?
Oh, do you know? He's so Father James Martin.
Uh,
All right. Well, he's a Jesuit priest who is all but this close from being openly homosexual. Promotes all that nastiness in the church and everything like that. And
wow. I don't know why y'all tolerate. I mean, well, I don't know why anybody tolerates it. Not just I mean,
yeah,
any yeah, whatever.
yeah.
But
you're right. I probably should have a few more reservations about talking about him.
I don't know. I mean, on the other hand, you got to call a spade a fucking spade, right?
Yeah, but you should pray for the spade, I guess, more than more than talking about it. I guess.
Yeah, he'll die a horrible, miserable, lingering death. Maybe that's not what Jesus had in mind.
I know. I might have to go back and double check that one.
Yeah, right. Yeah, love your enemies and pray for those that persecute you. Yeah.
That's right. Oh yeah, about that.
About that, yeah. that dang Sermon on the Mount. It gets me every time.
That's right.
Yeah. You reckon he did all that stuff?
That's right. I mean, how serious do you think he was, really?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Anyway, so I used to post all the time out there and engage, and because you've got your, the idiots from the materialist side, who think we're all, meat that we just have the illusion that we're conscious and blah blah blah. And I just finally, after 5 or 6 years of fighting with these idiots.
How are the Astros doing?
Somebody just hit a home run.
Ooh.
Tucker,
okay.
The right fielder. Yeah. Astros are up 1-0.
Good. I wonder if I could. Who are they playing tonight?
Phillies. Game
Phillies.
One of the World Series.
There we go. I wonder if I can. I can't pull up any video, but I can pull up the score.
Yeah. Anyway, and I mean, they just wore me out. I mean, you can only, sort of live in an intellectual sewer for so long,
Yeah.
And then there's this, how do you, or how can you, or what makes me think that I can reason with somebody who really rejects the authority of reason in matters of truth? I mean, what kind of sense does that make?
Yeah.
I mean, I have this conversation. You can't be certain of anything. Well, are you certain of that?
Are you sure about that?
Sure about that? Yeah, you can't be certain of anything. I'm like, but you say you're certain. So you, but that's just like,
yeah,
or the, I'm interested to see what my experience is going to be this time, because it's like trying to grab smoke.
Yeah. There you go.
Who wrote that?
Say.
Gary Lagrange.
Yep. This is where this whole book is his defense of that notion of common sense, the first principles of reason. How
I'm going to get that.
Yeah, I think
here, just a second. I'm going to go. I'll just write it down here.
Yeah.
Thomistic common sense. Yeah, because I think.
Yeah, I've become something of a disciple of Lagrange's over the last 2 years, I guess. Everything I've read, I mean, this whole section, all of this is his. And then I've got some of his other books that are just kind of scattered around that won't fit on the shelf here. But
yeah,
everything I've read by him is it's fantastic. It's phenomenal.
Well, good. Because hey, look, there are just certain things that you just can't argue with, okay?
You would think.
and the rules of logic, being one of them. Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I don't know if this will subject me to a copyright strike or not. We'll see. No, sometimes YouTube or whoever the other people they can get prickly about that.
About what are you doing?
Like if you're sharing somebody else's stuff.
Like whose stuff are you sharing?
Well, I don't know. This was just a Google search, so I don't know that. As I said, I don't know that this would. I can't imagine that this would subject me to any copyright strikes, but you never know with these clowns.
What would they do to you?
They'd put a strike on my channel.
A strike?
Yeah. I don't know. But we can go back to it as needed as stuff happens. Yeah. Wrong button.
And I used to ask these people. I'd say, look, before we get going, because really, you don't argue about conclusions, you argue about premises, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's where the game is, and I'd say, what are your fundamental intellectual commitments? What do you, and I say, I'm gonna ask again, and and you people never have any,
Well, that's like, how can they think anything without having some sort of fundamental commitment?
Well, that's
some presupposition. That's
but they won't say it. And I say, and they come back and they say, well, I mean, there's this one thread. I probably still got it somewhere. They came back and said, well, that's a really rude thing to say. That we don't have fun. I said, well, what are they? Mm-hmm. I'll give you mine. Identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, and causality. Okay.
Yep.
And existence. Okay. You can't talk me off of those. Right.
Not without some sort of absurdity.
Shoot me. But how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? I don't know. But those other things, I know.
Mm-hmm.
And but if they commit to something like that, then you got them.
Yeah.
Because if you commit to that, then inexorably it takes you to the truth, which is what they reject.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll see how long I can last this time.
Yeah, there are times when I don't really argue with people online just because, I mean, I know I'm never going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think Thomas says something somewhere. I'd have to go find the citation. I think it was somewhere in the chapter on, like, it was in correction or fraternal correction or something like that. Yeah. But he's like, if there's a legitimate chance that they're just not going to listen to you at all,
right,
don't bother.
Well, it becomes pearls before swine at some point, right?
Yeah.
I think Jesus said, give him one, talk to him once, twice, and then done.
Yeah. There's only, so there's so much that you can do. And then
that's pretty much the plan.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, because whenever I give a talk or something, and people go, how does anybody argue with this? I mean, what do they say?
Oh, you'd be surprised.
And so that's what I said in my first post, about, what is materialism, and let's come to some sort of common agreement. And my second one was, okay, now that we sort of, everybody's on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
I've looked, and I haven't seen as properties of matter anywhere that it can create itself, choose anything, animate itself, or understand the difference between right and wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how chemicals do that. Okay. I've never seen anybody claim that chemicals can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would like for you, materialists, if matter can't create matter, yet we're here, that's what we call a clue in the business.
That's right. That's right. That's that's a data point. That's a data point.
I said, I'm collecting answers here. Okay, so because I want to know.
Yeah.
And I want an empirical, rational, scientific, if you will, take me from chemicals to more chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
Take me from chemicals to consciousness. Take me from chemicals to language. Take me from chemicals to moral law. Just, I'll listen. Just tell me how you get there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, all these things don't exist.
Yeah. Well, that's
You know,
one of
there's
the.
no law, there's no consciousness, there's no, they don't exist. That's your answer?
Mm-hmm.
You deny every experience that every human being's ever had?
Yeah. It's something of a, what is that, oh my goodness. I should know this. I've forgotten the name of the fallacy, right? But it's the, if I don't know it or if I haven't heard of it, then it's not legitimate,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
What is it? The appeal to ignorance.
Yeah, feel
Right?
ignorance. Yeah.
Duh. But yeah, it's like, that's the thing. If they, I think intuitively they know, right, that you don't get more from the less.
You can't not know. In fact, I have a talk titled that.
Yeah, and so they have to have. You talk about one of their presuppositions is that well, I have to, like, I just presuppose that this has been possible.
Yeah.
Because if you want to tell me otherwise, right, that this can, that the more cannot come from the lesser,
right?
Well, I don't get that. I can't explain how things got to where they are now, and so whatever you're proposing then can't be legitimate.
Well, see, that's the other thing
on that fallacy.
Is that and I know that you can't get more out of your conclusions than the major premise. That's what you just said.
Yeah.
Okay. And if your major premise is uncertain, then your conclusion's uncertain. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
So,
that's exactly
So if your conclusion or your major premise is the only material things exist, right? Well, maybe true, maybe false. So in any best case, you haven't moved the bar. You haven't demonstrated anything.
No, you've assumed.
Okay? So,
You've assumed the very thing that's under contention.
Yeah. So anyway,
that's right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I was on this big atheist podcast one time several years ago, and I'm talking, and this guy allegedly has this big, national audience, 200,000, viewers or whatever.
It's more than I got.
And I'm saying, nothing. Something is impossible for something to come from nothing. Mm-hmm. He goes, well, what's nothing? And I laughed.
Sure, yeah.
He says, well, that's rude. I said, well, look, dude, come on. Nothing is nothing. It's no matter. It's no energy. It's no properties. It's no potentialities.
Yeah.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. Nothing. And if there ever was nothing, there'd still be nothing. Modus tollens on the way.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something. So there's never been nothing. You want to know why? Well, why is there anything rather than nothing? It's because there's always been something.
Mm-hmm.
Jackass. And we call that being God. Well, it's not a being. I mean, there's what are you going to call it?
Mm-hmm.
There's an eternal something.
That's
well,
right.
it's not God. Well, how do you? I mean.
Yeah, that's right. I'll stipulate to anything that you want. I won't call it God.
Yeah. Houston just scored another run.
Again? Awesome.
Cool.
I want to win the. So I got
anyway, so I'm back in the. We'll see how long I last.
Yeah. Well, you kind of come in to out a little bit, whatever.
Yeah. Hey, I tell you what, though, being at St. Thomas and talking with you guys and sitting in those classes did a world of good for me. I mean, it really helped clarify a lot of things.
Well, yeah, you were studying real wisdom under the master.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, man, Aristotle's 2,500 years ago. People still read what he wrote,
Yeah. And foolishly ignoring what he wrote, but
I'm a. I always joked about being the token Protestant, but my mentor in apologetics and philosophy was an evangelical Thomist.
Mm-hmm.
So in fact, I got him in touch with Canassus, and they corresponded a little bit. And so, I mean, I just fit right in. I mean, that just all made perfect sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there are Thomas on sort of both sides of that aisle.
Actually, I got to tell you, would you Would you be interested in a particular conversation with me?
Sure.
Talking about being the token Protestant.
Yeah.
And talking about, first principles and method of argumentation and whatever.
Yeah.
So here's this book.
Okay.
I've dropped it in the private chat there. It's $18.
The Marks of the Church.
The Marks of the Church by Robert Bellarmine.
Uh-huh.
I would be curious if you'd read that and tell me what you would have to say.
Okay.
About his arguments. Because reading it to me, like as a Catholic, I read that work by Bellarmine, and I don't see how it would be possible for one to respond. So I would be curious.
Okay. Is he still alive?
Oh, Bellarmine, he'd be really old.
Okay. I think I've heard the name.
You should have, but no,
Yeah.
Bellarmine was in the late 1570s.
Oh, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, so he's been, if he's still around, he's about 500 or 600 years old.
Okay.
But which is actually, it'd be even more curious considering he's buried in Rome. So
maybe he's got some elvish blood in him.
That's right. That's where he sleeps at night. That's all.
All right, yeah.
Where his tomb is.
Oh, I've watched The Lord of the Rings like a million times, right? I can't even go back and every time I look at that black elf, Arondir, whatever, I'm just like, are you kidding me, dude? And then you see Galadriel's sourpuss face.
That was her. I got to tell you, Arondir, actually, he was one of the more tolerable characters. If I actually had to say, he was
but I mean,
one of the more interesting.
What an acting job. Same expression. I mean,
yeah.
It's okay to smile. It's okay to have a,
And then, you know what there were two things that came out of watching The Rings of Power.
Yeah.
One, I went back and watched the Hobbit trilogy. Yeah. And I was like, wow, this is so awesome compared to
Yeah.
I was like, this is great.
I know.
And I've started reading the Silmarillion again.
Yeah.
I was like, this is so good. I'd rather do I want to go back and read the Silmarillion again.
Yeah.
I'm about halfway through. I'm about halfway.
Yeah.
Because I gotta be honest with you. I don't think I'm gonna pick up in 2 years or however long it takes them to get season 2 out. I don't think I'm gonna.
I might watch the first episode or two just so I can, shit on it again. But I don't see myself.
Well, did you see how terrible the ratings were? Like it's already like it was getting crushed by House of the Dragon, and they finally have the actual verified numbers to prove that.
Yeah.
It was getting crushed by like all of these. It was like 4 or 5 down on the. This is terrible. I think it was getting beaten by Cobra Kai at one point, which, all right, like Cobra Kai's pretty awesome, I think, but
Oh yeah,
I liked it, but I grew up.
Is that with Ralph Macchio? Is that the Karate Kid? Is that still about that?
Yeah, that's
just like a grown-up version now.
It was just that same story, but like 40 years later, or whatever, close to 40 years later.
Still there?
He's dead. And he's dead in real life, but I think even before the series started, and so he's dead in the series. But they actually bring that in a little bit. This is the great thing. All right, so like if you liked the original Karate Kid, okay, then you would love this series.
Okay,
it's a perfect balance of like it's bringing the old characters back. Showing how they've grown and developed, its respect for the old characters, but it also knows how to introduce new characters and balance their storyline with the old characters, because that's who you're in, while recognizing that there's new developments, there are new people on the scene, whatever. There's like, but it's great. There's talking about presuppositions. I think there are two things you need to just like presuppose. One, you're in a world where karate fights can just break out anywhere at any time, and that there's no police except for when it's convenient for the plot. If you can accept those two things, this show is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of presuppositional, you use that word. I don't know if there are any such thing as a Catholic presuppositional apologist, but in the evangelical or the Protestant side, there's a group of them. They're mostly this Reformed theology,
Hmm.
5-point Calvinists, which I think is just nonsense. But they presuppose their starting point is, God exists and the Bible is true, and that's where we start. And I'm like, well, dude,
there's a lot that's there.
You immediately have to I mean, how do you say that?
Yeah.
How do I say, well, yeah, God exists, but it's the Quran is the word of God, not the Bible.
Yeah. That's actually one of the first.
You got to defend it.
Yeah.
You can't presuppose it. You have to defend it.
Yeah. I think Thomas lays that down in the first question of the Summa Theologiae, when he's talking about like what serves as the principles for theological science.
Yeah.
And he talks about it's what's been divinely revealed.
Yeah.
But for Thomas, being a Dominican and all, right, what not only is right, it's the scripture and tradition, right? So for him, it's not only the scriptures themselves, it's also the magisterial interpretation of those scriptures has been handed on. He takes as being part of divine revelation. Also, it's these two things, right? And that's what he holds are the principles of theological science. So he probably would take his presupposed, right? Like the dogmatic definitions, the canons of all the early church councils. Yeah. Those are all given, right? Those are the hypotheses. Those are laid down.
Well, yeah, but yet he argues for the existence of God.
Oh, sure, but that's not a part of theology. I wouldn't. Right, that belongs properly to natural theology.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if you don't have, if there's no God, then there's no acts of God, word of God, or son of God.
Sure, but I think I would say. I think Thomas might say. I don't know. I don't want to speak for him, but I think what you would say is right. Theology, right? Because no science proves the existence of its own subject.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So by definition, theology, to prove that God exists doesn't belong to theological science. It takes it as given, especially if you're considering something like divine revelation. Something that doesn't exist can't have revealed itself to you.
Yeah, still, I mean, it still remains that, God.
Yeah, it would belong to the theologian. It belongs to the same science to refute errors.
Yeah.
But this would be where, like Thomas says in that first question, where theology makes use of, right? It uses the lower science of philosophy to show that, God's existence is demonstrable. And this is what you call natural theology, right? It's the last part of metaphysics.
Yeah.
Right? But it's that it doesn't belong to theology proper just because God is the subject of theological science, and the science doesn't prove the existence of its subject.
Yeah.
It relies on the lower sciences to be like, look, you can already prove God exists, and then we can refute the errors. Any reason you might say God doesn't exist, I can refute that. Right. Interestingly, that was one of the first you talk about, like, well, you just start with divine revelation. That was one of the Luther's marks of the church that Bellarmine takes on. It's like one of the first things, right? He talks about, here's what Luther said were the marks of the church. And he shows why that can't be. And the first one was when Luther had said, well, the preaching of the true scripture is a mark of the true church. And Bellarmine actually goes after him on that point. Like you just said, well, how do you know that the scripture is divine revelation? It could be the Quran or anything else. And Bellarmine's point is that you're actually using the scripture, which is less known, to make known the church, which should be more known, because it's the church that makes known scripture to you, right? Especially since there are so many writings, even in the early church, right, that go around. It's the church that gives the scriptures. And so Bellarmine's point is you can't start, right, with just the scriptures, because that's actually using what's less known. I always thought that was an interesting point. It was really fascinating to me.
Is there a form? Oh God, I'm like, oh man, there's no ebook version of this Bellarmine.
Ooh, I wonder if there's one on Amazon. I gave you the one from Mediatrix Press just because that's the guy that translates it.
Okay.
And I've always thought, you should support local.
Yeah.
Let's see, Bellarmine.
All right. Well, I'll go look on Amazon. So you give me. So I show up Friday night for some fun and games, and I get two reading assignments, right, Phil?
I mean, this is your fault.
What's that?
This is your fault.
Yeah.
There is. All right. Let's see. There's a Kindle edition on Amazon.
Yeah.
Here we go. I'll drop the link for you. Yeah, there is a Kindle edition, $8 on Amazon. And I think this is the same one, translated via Ryan Grant.
And it's on the Marks of the Church.
Yeah. And they do have a Kindle edition. Yeah, I'm trying to give you something to do with all this free time that you have on your hands. You know, I wouldn't want you to be bored.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Thanks for looking out for me. Yeah, I play tennis tomorrow morning at 9:00.
Nice.
Yeah, I play tennis 3 days a week. Haven't really started hitting golf balls yet.
Okay.
But yeah, so tomorrow's going to be a brutal day. I'll get up, have a bowl of Cheerios. I'll go play tennis for an hour. I'll come back. I'll shower. Then I'm going to probably take a nap and then watch college football all day.
Yeah, that sounds really brutal, actually.
It is.
I know. Yeah.
It's just awful. Sometimes the games aren't very good. You got to sit through them.
Well, and you have to sit all the way through the end to know if it's going to be really bad or not. Right? Like you have to. Yeah.
I usually give them about a half.
It's a good one.
I give them about a half.
You know, I was actually kind of upset last week because I don't have TV. Like I don't have cable. I don't pay for any. Like I don't pay for anything, and I've never hooked up my antenna because I just don't have. I watch too much YouTube as it is.
Yeah.
But I do have Amazon. I have Amazon Prime, and they have the monopoly on Thursday Night Football, right?
Yeah.
And last week the Saints were playing.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen a Saints game. Well, it's been a while.
Yeah.
And I totally forgot that they were playing. I ended up going to the gym.
Oh man.
And I totally missed the game last week.
Well, but I think
I heard it wasn't very good, so I didn't miss a whole lot. But
somebody beat them.
Yeah, I think everybody's beating them.
No, I mean, my daughter went to the Loyola, so she's, she's a bit huge Saints fans, which I always think is one of the funniest things of all time. Because she swam and did softball, that kind of stuff. But I mean, she never cared about football or basketball or anything. And but when the hurricane came, Katrina wiped out New Orleans. She came back, and the Saints. That was the year the Saints were winning the Super Bowl.
That was 2010.
A year after, a couple years after.
Yeah, it was a couple years after.
Yeah. She lives and dies the Saints. I mean, her little girls have Saints jerseys.
That's pretty awesome.
I know it is. It's hilarious.
I didn't know she went to Loyola.
Yeah.
Was that during Katrina?
No, she graduated by then. She graduated in 99.
Okay. Oh, all right. So yeah.
Wait. She graduated from high school in 99. So she graduated from Loyola in 2003.
Okay. So that was still about. Yeah, that's still about 2 or
making her way.
That was 2 or 3 years before I got to Tulane.
Bartending and playing poker at Texas Hold'em. I mean, she's a good poker player. If you ever find yourself in a Texas Hold'em game with a pretty blonde named Kimmy, don't
fold? Is that it? I got a phone call real quick. I gotta get out of here.
Hey, well, look, Phil, I'm going to get back to my wife in the game, but great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Next week, I'll be. Let me send me a link.
Yeah, I certainly will. I know that tonight Joe is at some sort of parent-teacher conferences or whatever. And it's all these losers that actually have jobs and lives and stuff.
I know.
They've got to do stuff. So whatever. All right, but yeah, I'll send you the link, Tom.
Thank God it's
next week. Yeah.
All right.
All right, man. Take care. See you. Get out of here, Tom.
Yeah. Well, what do I have to do?
Oh, good stuff. I miss seeing Tom. He used to be a regular on our Friday night groups when we were all in Houston together, but seems like so long ago now, and now it seems like I can't get anybody to stop by. And I guess we'll never become YouTube famous. Anywho's, since I am now just by myself, let's put the Astros score back up. And we can maybe just have that over on the side while I'm talking about stuff. We can see what's going on. I guess it's true. This is how. All right. So quick story. Talk about like I didn't even realize it was the World Series. This is how out of the loop that I've been. What was it? Yesterday. I think it was yesterday. I got in the elevator. And I got in the elevator. I pushed the button for the floor that I was on. Didn't even realize it, and the door shuts, and nothing happened. And I stood there for almost 30 full seconds, just going, before I realized, first of all, the elevator wasn't moving. And then I was, oh, what's going on? And then I was like, oh, in this crappy building, is the elevator broken again? Did it have it? And then I realized like and then it took a while to click. That's what I had done. I had pressed the button for the floor that I was on and not where I wanted to go. So, oh my goodness, this is a long day. Right? But like I mentioned earlier, between class prep and dissertation work and all the administration crap, I've started grinding my teeth again in my sleep. I wake up with a headache and like my jaw just clenched because I spend all my time like this. So might need to have a second drink just to help relax at the end of the week. It's almost time for a refill, actually. You can see. So anyway, well, I don't know. Can you see? Almost time for a refill. That's a lot of ice. So what I got tonight. So I made about a week ago. I made it was a fresh batch then of my maple cinnamon simple syrup. It's fantastic. It's a game changer. Right? If you've never done this before, equal parts maple syrup and water, and about 10 cinnamon sticks. So I do about half a cup to 3/4 of a cup of maple syrup, and then about 3/4 of a cup of water, and about 10 to 12 cinnamon sticks. And you don't boil it because that'll boil off the water, and then it turns back into just syrup, and you can't put that in drinks. You could make it a syrup for your pancakes, though. But you just bring it to a light simmer so that it's hot, and it starts to, seep that flavor out of the cinnamon sticks, and you let it simmer for about 25 minutes. And then you let it cool and strain it into, your little pour bottle. And oh my goodness, it's a game changer. So instead of an old fashioned, it's a maple cinnamon old fashioned, and it's delicious. Technically, this is a maple cinnamon black key because instead of just bourbon, which would be the old fashioned, I have a bourbon rum mix, about equal parts bourbon and rum. And oh, it's delicious. But you have to use good rum. Don't use anything cheap. I use Flor de Caña. It's fantastic, right? So good bourbon, good rum, mixed with that maple cinnamon simple syrup and orange or cherry, garnished with a cinnamon stick, a couple bitters on top. Perfect. All right. Doesn't look like anything's happened with the Astros yet. So, all right. So still they're up 2-0. This is awesome, right? So we can come back to that maybe a little later. All right. So 2 things. Then I guess, I don't know, while I'm just sitting here waiting, I haven't heard from anybody else. Like I said, I know Joe's got a school event. Who knows what Julian's up to, being a fancy headmaster. Jake is married. That bastard. And then everybody else, they all have families and stuff like that. See, thank me. It's just me and Batman. So I ain't got nothing to do else on a Friday night. So last week we were talking about something about the void, right? And one of the things, so I thought 2 things. I went back, first of all, and I read Coughlin, and it seems like Coughlin is on my side for this, that there's no way that you could say, right, that something like the nothing exists. Because he says, first, we have at least 2 problems you would need to explain, right? How can non-being have dimensions? We were talking, so Joe was talking about the planets, right, and the space between the planets, but that's a dimension, right? But dimension is predicated of quantity, and quantities in here in some sort of substance, at least, right, or quantities are extended somehow, right? because how can non-being have dimensions or have anything for that matter, right? You can't predicate dimension of nothing. It's silly to say that nothing has size. If the void exists, it has to be something, because non-being, which is nothing, right? It doesn't exist and it has no quantity. Okay. The second problem has to do with local motion, and that's true, but we didn't get into that, so I don't need to carry that on. But right, Aristotle shows in the Physics that if you really had a void, motion wouldn't be possible, because there'd be nowhere for something to move from or to move to, because there'd be nothing, right? The second thing I was thinking about when Joe was talking about, and he's free to watch this if he wants to dispute my account, he's free to. It's possible I didn't understand him when he was talking about that this distance between the planets was only said by relation, right? But relation seems tricky to me, because relation. I was trying to make this point last week. I don't know if I made it well. At least in a certain respect, relation is a mental thing, right? Like there's no fatherhood. I see that guy and I see that kid, and I know them to be related as father to son, son to father, right? Or any relation, double and a half, half and a double, whatever. Relations are terms that are defined through other things. Right? Something is smaller than something, but larger than something else. So bigger, larger, right, is a relation. Right? It's determined in relation to something else, whether it's large or small, so on and so forth. Oh, Jake's messaging. Let's see. Just me. Tom just left. Maybe if Jake comes on, he can talk about the void with us. And dang. Anyways, what was I saying? Oh, but that relations seem to be only in the mind. Though things are like, but again, that's what makes it, I said, was tricky. Was that they are in fact related, right? This is the father of that kid, and that kid is the son of that guy, right? Like that's but are the planetary bodies related in that way? I don't know, right? I think the knower, a human mind, would relate, like Mars is there and Jupiter is there. But whether, even if there was no mind to relate them by location, that one is here, the other one is over there, they would still be there, right? If there were no observers on Earth, I mean, all the planets still are in the solar system, I think. And so they're still separated by some distance. What the hell is Jake talking about? Yeah, we were late, they were here. When the other guys show up, though, maybe, right? We can usually go late enough that you can pop on. But yeah, I get it. It's no, oh shit, I can't even type. Look at this. I guess I do need another drink. I really just am rambling to myself if Jake wants to come on. But anyways, right. And so that was just, last thoughts about, as I said, I am still on, just FYI. Sort of rambling to myself. But you guys don't mind, right? Well, since I'm almost out, I've been on for about 45 minutes? Tom and I had a kind of decent conversation. I don't know that Jake will pop on or not. So then maybe one of the last things I'll do, I'll talk about. I mentioned that Sam, it's been a while since I've been a while since I've actually gotten to see him, because I haven't been to the Acton conference since before COVID. That was the last time I went, which is a shame because that's a conference. If you ever want to go to something that's put on really nice, really well, it's a great job and just an all-around super pleasant experience, is Acton University. It's usually the third week in June, right? It's about a 4-day long conference. It's fantastic. But anyway, I didn't actually mark the page, so let me see if I go by. But one of the things I thought was really interesting when I was reading through this book the other day was a comparison that he was making between, here we are, private property and national sovereignty. I thought this was really interesting because I've not thought about it this way before, and I would kind of be interested what the boys would have to say about it. Their stupid asses were here, but hey, whatever. Especially some of them, they tend to specialize in political thought, and so I really would be interested to hear what they have to say about it. I'm not that familiar with John Rawls. I've read parts of A Theory of Justice when I was an undergraduate at Tulane. There was a class I took from Dr. Eric Mack, who's still known, I think, in the field of political philosophy, although I haven't stayed familiar with his work. But he was a scholar of Robert Nozick, and that was we read Anarchy, State, and Utopia by Nozick, and part of A Theory of Justice by John Rawls, because that's who Nozick was responding to, and blah, 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 right? But so Sam's talking about here, so between guys like John Rawls and even John Finnis, who admittedly is a new natural law guy I'm not that sympathetic to, but Sam is a huge student of John Finnis, right? Most of, if I've read Dr. Gregg properly, and I think that I have, because he said this, most of what he knows about Thomism, Aristotelianism, or at the very least natural law thought, comes to him through John Finnis. And I don't think Finnis, as a new natural law guy, and I'm a classical natural law guy, I don't think he sees it rightly, but different thing, right? Soon, if anybody's interested, I would have probably as soon as I finish, I'll have my book review. I'll do an afternoon coffee with Phil, and we'll talk about this. But anyway, this analogy between private property and something like national sovereignty, that national sovereignty is the public equivalent of private property. This is kind of interesting, right? So St. Thomas gives a number of arguments for private property in the Treatise on Justice. And one of the arguments that Thomas gives, of course, is that the fruits of the earth are made more manifest, or they're better taken care of, or they're actually, they actually produce more, right? They produce better when they're cared for by one as opposed to being cared for by all, right? There's a question of prudence, right? One person or, a small handful that can own private property is better able to take care of it than a multitude that have no real responsibility towards that property. Right? And likewise, says the international order is better organized when the world is divided up into sovereign states, made up of peoples who share common bonds that facilitate order within a territory recognized as their own. Right? So again, as somebody is more willing to take care of something that's mine, right? They're willing to take care of something that's their own as opposed to, somebody else's property. It seems to follow nationally too, right? People have more of an affinity for their own country than they would for anybody else. And the parallels between sovereignty and private property don't end there. Right? Private property's ability to achieve its end is dependent on the owner's liberty to exclude others from using that property. Right? Without those powers, private property is effectively nullified. Right? We are plunged into the tragedy of the commons. Love it. And so too with national sovereignty. The government of a nation of 20 million people, might even say 330 million, may rightly decline to admit 10 million migrants who suddenly appear at its borders on the reasonable ground that immediately admitting all these migrants would severely disturb the nation's internal harmony. Right? So the same way the private property owner, right, as the fact that that's his property, wouldn't, and I don't know, could make an argument, couldn't just let anyone and everyone onto the property It would disrupt the very reason for that private property. That, I don't know, seems to follow the same way, right, for national borders. He goes on to say, though, the same way and in the same respect, right? So Thomas considers the question of like somebody starving, right? This is a famous passage in the treatise on justice that in states of emergency, goods are rendered common precisely because the goods of the earth are meant for the flourishing of humanity, right? It's just that they're better tended to when they're owned by individuals, but in states of emergency, the property is rendered common because that's its ultimate cause, the final ultimate end. So in cases of extreme necessity, St. Thomas states that private property becomes common to the extent that this will meet immediate need. Applying this logic to the case of migration, we can say that those facing imminent danger because of war, persecution, or famine in their country, and who do not possess any other reasonable remedy for their plight, can rightly seek refuge in another nation. A sovereign nation's power to exclude non-citizens thus isn't absolute. The same way that private property isn't absolute, right? In that sense, it's for some good, right? And so I really thought this was kind of a fascinating parallel. I'd never thought about it in those terms, but the parallel seems to track for me. Again, this is The Next American Economy by Samuel Gregg. It was published just almost 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks on Tuesday. And it's about time I would have finished the book, I think. But hey, whatever. But I said, I've never thought about it in terms of that kind of parallel. It seems to hold up to me. How are we? Oh my goodness. Look at this. Not that. 5-0 Astros. Are we in the top of the fourth? I missed something there. It was 2-0 just a second ago, so I don't know. There were either a couple of individual homers we missed or somebody hit a big one. A single and a double or maybe a triple. That would have been fun to see. All right. Oh. All right. Well, I think I've said everything I needed to say. Kind of brought up the void. There wasn't anybody here to talk about the void with. I brought up my parallel of state sovereignty and private property. Joe had a couple questions if he managed to show up, but he's not here. Oh, one last thing. All right, so before I end, so I saw this today. I think I'm going to check this out during Advent. I saw this today. So I might put this in the description of the video here, right? So everybody talked about like reading the Bible in a year. A year-long cycle, so reading the Bible, but according to the traditional Roman liturgy. So for those of you that know, the Roman Breviary has it in its section of matins, right? Readings from the scriptures throughout the entire year. There's Garrigou-Lagrange. We were just talking about him a little bit earlier. And so here's this. So they've put together this list, right, following the traditional breviary. But if you wanted to kind of read your way through the Bible in a year, here you go, right? So you start in Advent, which is just a couple weeks away, about a month away, I guess. So you start through Advent. You've got 4 weeks to read Isaiah. Right? About 2 weeks, Christmastide, to read St. Paul's letter to the Romans. In the first week after Epiphany, you read 1 Corinthians. The second week, 2 Corinthians. Right? Galatians is short, so you could probably do that Sunday to Wednesday. From Thursday to Saturday, Ephesians, which is short, right? So you work your way through Paul's letters. Some of these later weeks, right, 5, 5, and 6, maybe 4, 5, and 6, depending on the year, you might have to come back to these, right? You don't always get 6 full weeks after Epiphany before Septuagesima. It just depends on the full moon when Easter is. But during Septuagesima, you start at the beginning. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and Judges. Right? You don't go on to Ruth, though. So it's during Passiontide. That kind of makes sense. The last 2 weeks, you read Jeremiah. During the 3 days right before Easter, the Lamentations of Jeremiah. So that those go together. During the 8 days of Easter, I don't know, can you read all 4 Gospels? I guess you could, right? And then Acts of the Apostles, the book of Revelations, the Epistle of St. James, Peter, John, the letters of John, Jude, right? Kings. For those of you that don't use the traditional Bible, 1 and 2 Kings is 1 and 2 Samuel, and 3 and 4 Kings is 1 and 2 Kings. That makes sense, right? And then, of course, the Psalms, right? All the weeks after Pentecost. And then when you get into August, right? So the traditional breviary has special readings, not just for the weeks after Pentecost, but once you get into August, September, October, and November, right? And there you read the rest of the prophets and the other historical books and the wisdom books. Right? Paralipomenon, that's just the Greek word for chronicles. Again, if you don't have the traditional Bible. So I don't know. I was looking at this. I was like, I don't know that I'll get through it, but I think I might try that this year. Come Advent, maybe start to work my way through the Bible. At least try, I've read pretty much all of it, but I can't say that I've read it cover to cover. So it could be interesting. All right, then. That'll do it for me on this Friday night. Thanks for joining. I know I've had the video private the whole time, so nobody could join, but hey, it's just been me rambling to myself, and I don't have much of an audience yet. So this will be up in probably about a day or so. Hopefully we'll have other guys here next week. Certainly would be a lot more fun. But in the meantime, thanks for checking in. See y'all next week. Have a good evening. Like, share. Let's subscribe a little bit. Let's see if we can't get those Thomas guys a couple of subscribers. See if we can't start building the channel a little bit. But all right, guys, take care. See you next Friday.